Hello, welcome back to FM Live. My name is Mike with Flyin Miata, and today we're going to be talking about NC Turbo stuff. And in particular, we're going to be talking about driving impressions of the NC Turbo. We've covered in a few other videos some of the more technical aspects, and believe me, we are actually continuing to make improvements and tweak and make sure that all of the testing is done properly, so that way by the time they're available, it'll be a very smooth and finished, polished product. And we'll cover some more technical aspects in a future video as well as we continue development. But right now, I want to talk about what is it like to drive an NC with a turbocharger. As a kind of a basic starting line here, this car is my personal NC Miata. It's a 2013 Club. And this car, before I got it, was basically stock. And I've kind of wanted an NC for a little while anyway, but the whole idea behind getting this car as soon as I did was actually because we needed a second test mule for our NC Turbo Kit. We have Nancy, of course, which is our main shop car, but these two cars are both equipped with essentially the same prototype NC Turbo Kit that we've been developing. And this car has been here in Colorado in our shop the whole time. This one, actually, shortly after I got this car last year, we shipped it off to Detroit to be basically the in-house test bench car for our ECU calibrator, who has been doing all of the tuning work for us on this system and will be providing the tuning for all of the cars that we do for our customers going forward. So I actually only recently got this car back. It's been in Detroit for about 7 months now, but it's basically back and I've been enjoying every minute of it, is the short story. You could almost end the video right there. But to talk a little bit more about it, now that I've had the car back for, I think this is a little over 3 weeks now that I've been daily driving this car since it's been back after all of the tuning process, let's talk a little bit about what does it feel like. These cars and the tuning that we're doing on these cars is very natural. There are no weird habits. It's a very easygoing kind of car. And I want to kind of touch on the point of how stock this car is otherwise. Literally, there was nothing done to the car performance-wise at all to the car before I got it. The only thing that I've really done to it, besides the turbo, of course, at this point, is I did replace the shocks and bump stops with some conies, and I've done an aftermarket head unit in the car. I do have one of our clutch kits in this car. And that was mostly so that way when the car went out to our tuner in Detroit, our calibrator, that he didn't have to worry about any issues with the turbo overwhelming the stock clutch. The stock clutch had 90 some odd thousand miles on it. We weren't sure if it was burnt out or not, so we said, well, we'll preemptively replace the clutch. That way there's no problem. That's pretty much it. Oh, and a shift knob. So yeah, you know, nothing performance-wise really that's going to actually mess with the car and how it drives and the drivetrain, that kind of stuff. It's all stock. So that's kind of our baseline. And probably some of my guys would blame it on me being, you know, getting older and wanting to be comfortable and all that kind of thing. But I really like the NC for that reason. And I think that the platform as a whole is a great car if you want to be able to do some comfortable scenic drives or if you want to hit some twisty canyons. So I really didn't want to lose that aspect of the car. I didn't want this to become a track car necessarily. And the beautiful thing about this turbo kit is that it still can be that way. You know, you aren't giving up a whole bunch of reliability or a whole bunch of drivability just to bolt on horsepower. So my normally just driving into work every day and back home kind of thing is just through town. It's about 13, 14 miles from my house to the shop. Through some city roads. I think the fastest that I drive is one section that gets up to 55 miles an hour, and that's about it. So pretty basic daily driving to and from work. And when it's doing that with the turbo, it's pretty awesome, actually. There are no hiccups. There are no weird shudders, vibrations, or otherwise. It just does the thing. What you want to hear, of course, is that when you put your foot down, yes, it acts like a turbo car. You've got power. You have that really exciting thrust forward momentum to be able to propel you, and it's great. It feels like a really responsive turbo car. You do have kind of this Jekyll Hyde personality, but he's just fast and exciting. So like the stock car still behaves like a very well-mannered vehicle, But when you put your foot down, you can have a little bit extra excitement without any extra drama. Of course, unless you drive like that. Let's talk about the differences before and after. The only things that stand out to me driving it normally is that partly because this is a very advanced tuning technique that we're doing on this setup, but also because we want it to be carb legal. One of the things that's changed between the car when it was stock versus now is that we actually have a kind of a cat warm-up period. If you've ever had or been in a ND Miata, when you start them for the first time, they kind of do this loud roaring noise that you're like, what is going on, for the first 30 seconds when you first start up an ND. And that's Mazda's ECU tuning. Actually, it retards the ignition timing significantly, so that way a lot of the combustion happens on its way out the exhaust. And that helps to get the cat warmed up and basically make it more efficient sooner than as if it was just running normally. So that's a trick that Mazda's implemented on the newer cars. We've actually taken that same idea and we now have applied it to the NCs for this turbo kit. So for most cars, you're actually going to have as clean as, if not better, emissions because of the new techniques that we are implementing using some of Mazda's theory that they have implemented on the newer cars. So all that said, you can hear it on the NC. So when you start up the car, you do get a little bit more of a, because you can hear it through the intake of the turbo system more audibly than you can with a stock car. And obviously the stock airbox is not here anymore. You do have an open style filter element, kind of a not really a cone element, but you know, an oval cone, whatever you want to call it. But anyway, you do hear a little bit more intake noise, and especially on the cat warm-up right when you start a car for about the first 25 seconds or so. Beyond that, differences stock to turbo. I hear the blow-off noise. Get into boost, you let off the throttle, you get that nice this is a recirculated setup, so it's not like if you live in Colorado and there's all the modified Subarus driving around, you know, zooming, buzzing, and you hear the, you know, this almost explosion-like blow-off valve. It's not like that, but you can still hear the blow-off valve, so there is that you can notice. Obviously, there's more power when you put your foot down. That should be pretty much a given with a turbocharger. But otherwise, stock to turbo, there's not really much else to talk about drivability-wise or differences that you notice, because it's more. It's not changing the behavior of the engine. It's not changing the behavior of the drivability. It's all bolting on power to the stock ECU and the stock Mazda mapping to where everything outside of boost just acts like a stock car. It's pretty amazing that way. I'm very happy with it. Oh, boost response. That was another common question that we got. What does it feel like? What are you guys using? Okay, so I'm not going to talk about technical specs too much here, but if you haven't seen or haven't read into this before, we are using a genuine Garrett 2860 RS turbocharger, the Disco Potato. This is a very common turbo to use for 4-cylinder engines, especially around 2 liters of displacement. We found that bang for buck, it's a great option for the 2 liters, so that is why we have chosen that turbocharger. They're actually pretty reasonably high compression engines already from the factory, and then pairing that with a relatively mid-sized turbocharger for the displacement means that that boost response is super perky. You pretty much just roll into the throttle gently, and you can be moving over into the positive pressure. You know, if you're watching a boost gauge, you watch it move over to that 0 and into boost really, really quickly. I typically notice that I'm already making positive pressure by 45–50% throttle application, you know, and that's just like leaning into it a little bit, not even like, you know, trying to slam on into it or do anything aggressive. This turbo reacts so quickly. We typically are seeing full boost, which is about 8 psi by 3,400 RPM or so. It's very sprightly. It's actually very surprisingly similar to our ND turbo kits, which feature a very high compression engine and a twin scroll turbo. These aren't as high compression engines, and they're not a twin scroll turbo. So given that they have similar driving characteristics and boost response is very impressive. I'm quite pleased. It's very fun. So if you're looking for something a bit more Maybe not quite supercharger kind of response, but something that has that very immediate gratifying response. This turbo combination with this engine is a great matchup. So for a street car application especially, very, very good. It makes all the right noises and it has the right boost response that it's very rewarding to drive on the street, even if you're not driving very aggressively. So for daily driving, I like it quite a bit. What does it sound like? Well, because it's a stock exhaust system, it doesn't sound all that different, but we're actually going to start it up and let you listen to it because, of course, it's going to sound a little bit more chirpy, a little bit more whistly. So let's give it a listen. Yep. All right, so that's a little bit of idle. So let's hear what it sounds like when you rev it up a little. And now a little bit at the tailpipe. This is a stock exhaust. So pretty tame overall. Remember that turbocharger does act a little bit like a muffler itself, so for the exhaust note, you're not really getting a whole bunch. It's pretty tame, but if you want it to make whooshy cool noises like turbos do, you step on it a little bit and it will oblige. So one of the questions we got was, or actually a couple of questions were about track time. So this car, I have not tracked. I'm very sorry. I've only had it for about 3 weeks now. It's still quite cold here in Colorado. So no, I haven't tracked this particular car. However, we have tracked this car. So Nancy, our shop car, has seen several track days. Last fall, before it got too cold, actually several of our guys went out and tracked this car. I was not one of them, so unfortunately I don't have any personal insight, but I heard that it was excellent. To kind of ease some of the concerns about track use versus street use, we are doing lots of testing on both applications. This car will see more track time in the future this spring and summer, whenever it starts to get a little bit more warmed up out here. And then this car might see one track day. I don't know. I really bought this car to be more of a cruiser and fun toy for the daily driving and weekends, that kind of stuff. It's a power retractable hardtop. I'm not looking to get too serious with racing, so I might get a little bit, you know, jumpy with it and take it to the track once or twice, but that's probably it. But anyway, we are doing quite a bit of street testing and quite a bit of track testing, so both applications are being looked at and strongly considered with the reliability and usability of this turbo system. Another question we got a lot about is, can we expect it to be reliable? And in short, yes. A big part of what we're doing with these turbo kits is trying to make them as reliable as possible, so that way you can spend as much time as you can in the car driving and enjoying the boost. So a big part of why, and I'll talk about this in a little bit, but a big part of why it's been so long in the development process is because we're trying to make sure everything is as well sorted as possible. But reliability, everything that we have seen so far that has been even an inkling of an issue, we have addressed. And we are continuing that process to make sure that it's as polished as possible once it's ready to go. I think the only frustrating thing that I'm dealing with on the car at the moment is that the Android Auto disconnects on me all the time, and I hate it. That's my biggest complaint. So nothing about the turbo. We have the pleasure of being able to test different cars. Of course, I've driven NAs, NBs, NCs, NDs, and you know, I get the chance and opportunity to be able to drive all of these different cars here at FM. This question that we got is asking, what is it like to compare the new NC Turbo Kit versus the other 3 generations that we have turbo kits for? And I have great news for all of the captains out there, because I am a little bit biased. I'll say that out loud, but I think this is a fantastic turbo kit, and I would argue that it's probably FM's best turbo kit so far. It makes more power than any of the other turbo kits that we have currently. And no, I won't give you the numbers just yet. We have some preliminary data dyno information, but we will be sharing that later once we have everything as full production stuff ready to go. So that way everything is apples to apples. But even just seat of the pants feeling, this car, this turbo kit, is definitely quicker than the other 3 generations that we offer. As far as drivability is concerned, actually it's probably the most similar to the NDs because, again, the high compression engine, the very responsive turbocharger, and the benefit of us being able to use the stock ECU and reflash it. Whereas with the NAs and NBs, we use a piggyback so that way we can help add fuel during boost, all that kind of stuff. And they have more mechanical means of controlling the ignition timing because they have a static ignition retard. Whereas with these cars, we just tell the stock computer what we want it to do using some software, and it's just operating like a stock car. So it's very smooth. The interactive drivability of these cars, the NDs and the NCs, is actually pretty similar. Would I prefer this, one generation over the other, given the same apples to apples comparison? That's also a pretty tough one, but I think I'm biased. I'm still gonna have to go with the NC. I think it is overall the best, smoothest, and most refined turbo kit that we've built to date. So I'm very excited to announce and talk about that. So, of course, with any aftermarket turbo kit or any aftermarket parts that you put on a car, you always have to think, okay, if I do this, what does it change about the car? Are there any downsides I need to be concerned with? Should I be looking out for anything in particular? And with our turbo kit, really, that's one of the things, besides reliability, we're trying to reduce any downsides as much as possible so that way it's as clear a choice to be able to have a turbo kit on your car and not feel like you're giving up anything else to do so. Maintenance stuff or doing other things on the car, I haven't noticed any real issue. Underneath the car, you still have plenty of access to your oil filter, to your oil drain on the oil pan. Anything up top here, you're not really changing access to like belts and fluids and reservoirs and stuff like that. So maintenance-wise, I haven't noticed any other kind of issue that needs to be addressed besides the turbo kit. Really, if anything, just like little picky things like having to move the filter. And that's just because I've replaced my bulbs and played with stuff, several times in the last month. Accessibility and being able to work on the car really is about the same as stock. There's not really anything that gets in the way thanks to the layout that we have with our turbo kit. I can't think of any real downside. We're trying very hard to minimize those as much as possible. And I will point out, my car is very much prototype pieces, has lots of additional sensors. We're utilizing the Banks iData system. So I've got a lot more stuff in here than what the production models will have. So if you're looking at my engine bay and thinking, man, you've got a lot of black spaghetti in there, don't worry. Production kits will be much nicer, cleaner looking than this. This is just for testing. But realistically, with this particular setup, this turbo on this car, this engine, you don't have to do a whole bunch of stuff. This car does have a slightly larger exhaust on it. It does have a 2.5-inch axle back or something like that. Not anything major. So you can do a little bit of exhaust stuff on this, and it still seems like it's working out pretty well. So if you do have an aftermarket exhaust already on your car, it'll probably work out fine. But as far as other things that you need to do, not necessarily. When, for the love of God, can we have these turbo kits? Please sell us these turbo kits. Yes, we are working on it. So we actually, and I'm sure, actually, I think Brandon talked about this quite a bit in the previous video, but we are working on some of the long production run style stuff first. So some of our big pieces like our custom cast manifolds and outlets, oil drain lines, that kind of stuff. The things that take the longest time to be produced and then sent out to us so that way we can have them here and package up kits. Those are in process. Everything that is all the custom things are in process, and we're just waiting for manufacturers to be able to deliver parts to us for a lot of the big stuff. Some of the little stuff, parts of the intake, that kind of thing, some of the cooling lines, we're still working out minute details and doing some more testing to verify that our designs are good, reliable, and shouldn't have any other unforeseen issues pop up. Those things have a much shorter lead time, and so we've got a little bit more time on those. all of that said and aside, we are hoping to have these turbo kits available this summer. So summer 2024, we should have some NC turbo kits available for purchase at that time. Sorry, I don't have a specific date just yet. Again, we're waiting for manufacturing to actually happen and then have parts physically here, and then we'll be able to have some more finite details on availability, but we're aiming for this summer. So knock on wood, you'll be able to have some really fun boost and of course carb legal boost. So anywhere here in North America, you should be able to bolt on this turbo kit and be able to pass emissions and still have a ton of fun for minimal effort and hopefully relatively reasonable cost. We're aiming for roughly the same cost as like our NA and NB turbo kits, since this is an in-house built turbo kit. So around that ballpark, we'll see. Of course, more final details to come in the future. So how many brown pants moments have I made or had? I haven't had to change my britches yet, but I will say that if you're driving around on winter tires and going around a corner and decide to goose it a little bit to, you know, make things exciting, you can break traction very easily. It doesn't take much, and especially with the kind of boost response that we're getting here, being able to transition into making significantly more power than stock doesn't take long at all. So if you ask it to give it a little, it'll give it a little. So yeah, I've slid a couple of times. Nothing too crazy though. This car has stability control and ABS and all that kind of stuff, so it'll come and, you know, save me whenever I step out of line a little bit. So what is it like to drive this car fuel economy wise? So I checked it this week and I didn't use the gauge in the car. I wanted to actually measure it, you know, based on how much I put in the tank. And I have been averaging the last 3 weeks about 26 miles to the gallon. Now that's in town. I haven't done any highway trips or anything like that. And if you've ever had a new turbo system installed, you tend to spend more time with your foot down. So, yep. Before the turbo, here in town, driving around town, actually that's pretty close to what I was averaging before. You know, in town, I was usually like 26 to 28-ish, you know, sometimes 29. I'm actually pretty curious to take this on a road trip now that it's got the turbo and see what it's like for fuel economy on the highway. I got usually 32-ish on the highway, 34-ish if I was being extra good. Naturally aspirated, so I'm curious to see what it's going to be like stock. I'm guessing, based on my experience with the other cars, that probably a lot of it has to do with my right foot. So if I can behave myself, I'll probably improve that number, but gosh darn if it isn't so much fun with the turbo. Something miles per gallon rather than miles. So right now, out here in Colorado, the highest grade octane that we have access to at the pump is 91. We do recommend and / require that you run at least 91 octane for this turbo system, which really for an NC, you probably should be running better octane than not anyway. You can run lower with a naturally aspirated engine, but you're given a little bit of horsepower up. So with the turbo, you definitely need to run at least 91 octane. Do I need to plan on different maintenance now that it's turbocharged compared to when it was naturally aspirated before? In a nutshell, not a whole bunch. So especially for street use, we're not changing or planning to change the oil viscosity. This is an NC3, so the stock engine oil viscosity is a 0W20. Yeah, 0W20. So that's what we have been using, and it has been hunky-dory for street use. If it is a dedicated track car, you may need to go up to a slightly higher, you know, 0W30 or 5W30, depending on, you know, how heavy-duty track use this is. But for street use especially, and I think even in this car, we've been doing 0W20 for track time and have had pretty good results. So don't really have to worry about changing the formulation there. One good thing to note about your oil is that, especially with track time, a good rule of thumb is that if you're going to check your oil to see if it needs to be replaced, mine's actually getting a little bit dark here, but if you can pull your dipstick and you see that the oil is so dark that you can't really see the dipstick through the oil, regardless of miles, that's a good indicator that you should probably replace it. So with track time and or with boost, that is a good rule of thumb beyond just replacing your oil every 3,000 miles or every 3 months, yada yada. For coolant, we still pretty much always recommend that you run a 70-30 mix of coolant, and that's going to be 70% distilled water, 30% antifreeze. We like ethylene glycol, the green stuff. You can choose to use the Mazda dark green stuff or whatever else if you've got a preference. Just make sure you flush it completely before you fill it up with anything else. But usually 30-70 mix or 70-30 mix, that's ideal for most cars, especially ones that you're asking more power and more heat out of them. The only thing is that if you live somewhere that it stays or gets below freezing more frequently than others, you may need to change it out for winter. But I pretty much just run 70-30 all the time. Where we are, we don't really see below freezing much, if at all, and it's been rock solid. But other than that, I don't plan on doing a whole bunch different for maintenance stuff. I guess if you have any more questions about this that we didn't answer in this video, please drop us a comment down below. You can also call us or send us an email directly if you'd like. We have that information in our comment section or details section down below, of course, too. Otherwise, thank you very much for watching. We sure appreciate it. Be sure to like and subscribe this video so that way you can get notifications about these kinds of videos whenever they come out in the future. Of course, if you want to actually get notifications via YouTube, click that little bell icon, that kind of stuff. You know the deal. You're smart people. But otherwise, we really appreciate your attention. Thank you so much for watching. Thank you for all your questions. And of course, we look forward to bringing you more and more updates about the NC Turbo platform as they come out. So keep an eye on our YouTube channel as well as our social and let's just say FlyinMiata.com. We always put out new information there on the banner too. So thank you again. Please let us know if we can help you out. If you have any more questions, we'd love to talk to you. But until next time, thank you for watching. We'll see you later.